She showed her compassion. Now the alien warrior will protect him at all costs. Mercy in the ruins, the silence felt wrong. After 3 days of constant artillery fire, the sudden quiet pressed against Corporal Jace Thorne's eardrums, like a living thing. He crouched in the shadow of a collapsed research tower, scanning the devastated compound through his scope. Smoke still rose from crater-pocked buildings, and the acrid smell of melted plasteel made his eyes water. The ceasefire had taken effect an hour ago. Temporary, fragile, probably doomed like the 6 others before it. But orders were orders. No engagement with enemy forces, no deviation from patrol routes, no heroics. The diplomats would hash it out while soldiers like him counted bodies and tried not to think too hard about what came next. His comm crackled softly. Tango 7, report status. All quiet here, base. No movement detected. Jace adjusted his medic's pack, feeling the familiar weight of supplies that had kept too many people alive and failed to save too many others. 28 years old. And he felt twice that, courtesy of a war that had been grinding on since he was barely out of training. The research facility had been a joint venture once, human and Catherian scientists working together on something called bio-neural integration, whatever that meant. Now it was just another casualty, another reminder that progress died first in every war. He was about to move to the next checkpoint when he heard it, a sound like escaping steam, rhythmic and weak. His training kicked in before his brain caught up. That wasn't machinery. That was someone breathing, labored and pained. Jace hesitated. The sound came from the direction of the main lab complex, well outside his patrol zone. Getting involved with enemy wounded violated about 6 different protocols, and his lieutenant had made it clear that bending rules was a luxury they couldn't afford. The breathing hitched, then resumed, fainter. Hell, he muttered, and moved toward the sound. The main lab had taken a direct hit from something heavy, probably one of their own orbital cannons, judging by the fusion glass crater in the center. Debris field extended 50 meters in every direction. Twisted metal, shattered equipment, and the crystalline fragments that marked Catherian technology. He found her pinned beneath what had once been a support beam, violet skin stark against the gray rubble. A Catherian, one of their warrior class, if the intricate scarification along her arms was any indication. Her breathing was shallow, rapid, and a dark stain spread beneath the beam crushing her left leg. Jace approached carefully, medkit in one hand, sidearm loose in its holster. Catherians could play dead better than any species in the galaxy, and this one wore the black and silver of their scout units, the ones who specialized in appearing harmless right before they killed you. Her eyes opened as he drew closer. Pale, amber, like sunlight through old honey. They tracked to his Red Cross insignia, then to his face. No fear, just calculation. Human, she said, in accented standard. Her voice was steady, despite the obvious pain. Have you come to finish what your weapon started? I've come to help. Jace knelt beside the beam, assessing the damage. The metal had twisted when it fell, creating a cage around her lower body. This is going to hurt. Pain is temporary. Death is not. She tried to shift position and winced. Why do you offer aid to an enemy? Because right now you're not my enemy. You're my patient. He set down his kit and examined the beam's position. What's your name? She studied him for a long moment. Zara Velthan, 4th Talon of the Crystal Shore. Jace Thorne, medic, Terran Expeditionary Force. He gripped the beam and tested its weight. I'm going to lift this on 3. When I do, you need to pull yourself clear. Can you do that? I am Catherian. We endure. Right. 1. He lifted on 1, catching her off guard. The beam rose 6 inches. Not much, but enough. Zara bit back a cry and dragged herself free with movements that spoke of extensive combat training. When Jace lowered the beam, she was clear but pale, her breathing ragged. Deceptive, she said. Humans have no honor in battle. Maybe. But we get results. Jace opened his med kit and pulled out a scanner. Your leg's broken in 2 places, but no arterial damage. I can stabilize it, but you'll need proper medical attention. And you would provide this, even knowing I have killed your kind? Jace met her gaze. How many humans have you killed, Zara? In this war. 17 confirmed. Perhaps more. I've saved 43 lives in the last 6 months. Humans, Cytherians, even a couple of centaurs who got caught in the crossfire. He began assembling a field splint. We can keep score if you want, but I'd rather focus on making those numbers better. Zara watched him work with the intensity of someone cataloging every movement for later analysis. Your kind's medical knowledge of my species is limited. How do you know what will help? Universal anatomy basics, plus some reading I've done. The truth was he'd studied Cytherian physiology obsessively after his first encounter with their, wounded, a young soldier not much older than Zara, dying slowly because Jace hadn't known their blood chemistry well enough to adapt human treatments. That soldier had died in his arms, and Jace had sworn it wouldn't happen again. He worked in careful silence, immobilizing the fractures and applying synthetic bone paste to encourage healing. Zara endured it without complaint, though he caught her gripping a piece of rubble so tightly her knuckles went white. There, he said finally. That should hold until you can reach your own medics. Try not to put weight on it for at least 12 hours. Why? The question came out sharp, suspicious. Because bones need time to— No, why do this? You gain nothing, risk much. Jace packed his supplies, considering the question. Around them, the ruins held their breath, waiting for his answer. Because maybe if enough of us stop seeing enemies and start seeing people, this whole mess might actually end someday. Naive. Probably. But I'd rather be naive than dead inside. Zara struggled to her feet, using the rubble for support. She was taller than he'd expected. Most Cytherians were. And despite her injuries, she moved with predatory grace. You should leave this place, Jace Thorne, soon. Why? Because your patrol pattern is predictable and my people are not all as grateful as I. She limped toward the perimeter, pausing to look back. The ridge overlooking checkpoint 7. Avoid it. Zara. She stopped. Will I see you again? Her amber eyes held something he couldn't read, regret perhaps, or warning. In war, meetings are rarely coincidental, but if we do meet again, remember this. Mercy is a luxury that soldiers cannot always afford. She disappeared into the rubble, mazed with the fluid silence of her kind, leaving Jace alone with the weight of what he'd done. His comm crackled again. Tango 7, returning to base. Copy that. Any incidents to report? Jace looked toward the ridgeline where snipers might already be setting up, then at the blood-stained ground where Zara had lain. Negative, base. All quiet. But as he made his way back to the extraction point, taking a deliberately circuitous route that avoided checkpoint 7, he couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter had changed something fundamental. The war would go on. Ceasefires never lasted. But maybe, just maybe, he'd planted a seed that might grow into something better. The ridge remained silent as he passed below it, and Jace allowed himself to hope that mercy, once given, might sometimes be repaid in kind. Above them, the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, distant and eternal, witnesses to the small moment of humanity that had passed between enemies in the ruins of a dream. Hunter and Healer 3 weeks after the ceasefire collapsed, spectacularly as they all did, Jace found himself assigned to Research Station Omega-12, a gleaming facility carved into the living rock of a jungle moon. The official reason was xenobiology support for enhanced medical protocols. The real reason, according to Lieutenant Commander Nix Blackwood, was that asking too many questions about enemy physiology had made certain people nervous. You're not in trouble, Thorne, Blackwood had said, her steel-gray eyes giving nothing away. But your academic interests might be better served in a research environment. So here he was, playing nursemaid to scientists, while the war raged on 3 systems away. The facility housed 47 researchers led by Dr. Mira Santos, a xenobiologist whose enthusiasm for Cytherian anatomy bordered on obsession. Her lab occupied the station's lowest level, behind enough security doors to make a paranoid android jealous. Fascinating creatures, Santos had told him during orientation, her dark eyes bright with fervor. Their cellular regeneration rates are extraordinary, but the neural pathways, those are what truly set them apart. The way they process pain, fear, even death, it's completely alien to human experience. Jace had nodded politely while fighting. The urge to mention that he'd seen Cytherian pain up close, had watched Amber Eyes struggle with very familiar emotions. But that conversation stayed locked away with everything else from that day in the ruins. The attack came at 0347 local time, during the deepest part of the night cycle. Emergency klaxons shrieked through the corridors as Jace rolled out of his bunk, grabbing his medkit and sidearm. The facility's AI spoke in clipped, measured tones. Hull breach detected. Level 7 compromised. All personnel evacuate to designated safe zones. Level 7. Santos's lab. Jace joined the stream of researchers and security personnel heading for the emergency lifts, but something made him pause. A sound, faint, almost lost in the chaos of alarms and running feet. The same rhythmic breathing he'd heard 3 weeks ago. He broke away from the evacuation route and headed down instead of up. Level 7 was a war zone. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, and the air tasted of ozone and melted metal. Someone had blown the main laboratory door off its hinges, from the inside, judging by the blast pattern. Beyond it, sophisticated equipment lay in ruins. The breathing came from behind an overturned surgical table. Jace approached carefully, weapon ready, and found 2 figures huddled in the wreckage. One was definitely Cytherian, male, wearing matte black infiltration gear, his violet. Skin marred by burns and what looked like neural probe wounds. The other knelt beside him, her back to Jace, amber hair spilling over familiar scarred shoulders. Zara. She spun, a curved blade appearing in her hand with liquid speed. For a heartbeat, they stared at each other across the ruined lab, the space, between them electric with possibility and danger. You, she said. Not surprise, recognition. I told you meetings were rarely coincidental. What are you doing here? Cleaning up. Her eyes flicked to the wounded Cytherian. This is Theron Kess, my bond brother. He came here to destroy evidence of what your people have been doing. Now he is dying because of their safeguards. Jace looked closer at Theron's injuries. The neural probe wounds were precise, surgical, not combat damage. What kind of evidence? See for yourself. Zara gestured with her blade toward the laboratory's central workstation. The screen still functioned, displaying data files that made Jace's stomach turn. Neural dissection protocols, pain response mapping, torture, dressed up in scientific language, and sanctioned by people who'd probably never seen the inside of a combat zone. Santos? He asked. Among others. Your Lieutenant Commander Blackwood was very interested in our psychological breaking points. Zara's voice held the carefully controlled fury of someone who'd learned to weaponize anger. Theron discovered they were planning to expand the program. Use prisoners of war as test subjects. The wounded Cytherian stirred, amber eyes opening to focus on Jace with effort. Human, he whispered in accented standard. Are you here to finish their work? I'm here to help. Jace knelt beside him, scanner already out. Though I'm starting to wonder if that means something different than I thought. Theron's injuries were severe. Neural feedback from the lab's security systems had damaged his central nervous system, and he was bleeding internally. Without immediate surgery, he had maybe an hour. I can stabilize him, Jace said. But not. Here, we need to get to the medical bay. Impossible, your security forces are conducting sweeps. They will shoot us on sight. Then we go around them. Jace began preparing emergency stimulants. I know this facility better than they think. Zara studied him with that same intense focus he remembered. Why would you do this? Your own people, my own people, are running illegal torture experiments on prisoners. That's not medicine, it's butchery. He met her gaze. And you warned me about that sniper nest. I figure I owe you one. For the first time since he'd known her, Zara smiled, a brief, fierce expression that transformed her face. One debt, perhaps, but what we ask will create many more. I'll take that risk. They moved through the facility's maintenance passages, Zara carrying Theron while Jace led the way. The evacuation had drawn most security to the upper levels, but they still had to avoid 2 patrol teams and a hovering surveillance drone. The medical bay was empty except for emergency lighting and the hum of standby equipment. Jace activated the surgical suite while Zara secured the entrances. I need to operate, he told her. The neural damage is extensive, and your people's biology is different enough that I'm working blind in some areas. What do you need? Your trust. He began prepping Theron for surgery. And maybe some of that Catherian endurance you mentioned. The operation took 4 hours. Jace worked with methodical precision while Zara watched, occasionally offering insights into Catherian anatomy that no human textbook contained. Outside, security teams conducted their searches, growing more frustrated as they found no trace
of the infiltrators. There, Jace said finally, stepping back from the surgical table. The neural pathways are restored and the internal bleeding is stopped.
He'll need time to recover, but he should make it. Theron's eyes opened, clearer now. Bond sister? Here, brother. Zara gripped his hand. The human healer has given you life twice over. Not the human. This human. Theron's gaze found Jace. I am in your debt, healer. My life, my honor. Both are yours if you have need. Just get better. That's payment enough. Zara stood, her expression unreadable. We must leave. Dawn approaches, and with it, reinforcements. Where will you go? Somewhere. Safe. There are others who need to know what we found here. She paused. Jace. This conspiracy involves people from both our sides. Extremists who profit from prolonged war. They will not let peace happen while they draw breath. What are you saying? I am saying that healers may need to become something, more than healers if they wish to see an end to the killing. She moved toward the door, supporting Theron. The next time we meet, and we will meet again, remember that some wounds can only be healed by cutting out the infection.
Commander Voss emerged from the shadows, flanked by his personal guard. Ingenious, Princess. Trigger your little cascade weapon, then redirect it through our systems to amplify the effect. You'd kill billions to save trillions. Better than letting you murder them all slowly, Nira replied, raising her weapon. Perhaps, but you've made one critical error. Voss smiled coldly. The cascade has already begun, but I've modified the targeting system. Instead of disabling our ships, your precious pulse will be channeled directly into the Star Crusher's main weapon. Every crystal core explosion will add to our firepower. By trying to destroy us, you've given us enough energy to crack stars themselves. The truth hit Nira like a physical blow. She'd played right into his hands, turning her people's final legacy into the instrument of galactic genocide. No, Dex said suddenly, moving toward the central control console. There's still a way. Dex, don't. He was already at the controls, his fingers flying over interfaces despite the weakness in his limbs. Manual override, he explained through gritted teeth. I can reverse the pulse direction, send it back through the crystal matrix. It'll overload the entire weapon. That's suicide, Voss snarled, raising his own weapon. The feedback will vaporize everything within 1,000 kilometers. I know. Dex looked back at Nira, and for a moment his eyes held all the warmth she remembered. I kept my promise before. Bought you time to escape. Let me do it again. Not. Without me, Nira said, moving to stand beside him at the console. We do this together. Their hands met on the activation controls as Voss opened fire. Energy bolts seared the air around them, but Zara and the other freed prisoners had formed a protective circle, returning fire with desperate accuracy. I should have told you, Nira said as warning lights began flashing throughout the chamber. 3 years ago, I should have told you how I felt. Dex smiled, his finger hovering over the final activation switch. You just did. The pulse wave erupted outward from the crystal matrices, a cascade of blue-white energy that consumed the weapon chamber, then the fortress, then spread to engulf every ship in the Obsidian fleet. For a moment, that lasted eternity. Space itself seemed to burn with the dying light of Lumenis. When consciousness returned, Nira found herself floating in an escape pod, surrounded by the scattered debris of what had once been the galaxy's most feared armada. Through the viewport, she could see other pods, survivors from both sides, suspended in the sudden peace that followed annihilation. "Status report," came Zara's voice over the comm, strained but alive. "Fortress destroyed," reported Holloway. "Obsidian fleet, gone. All of it." "Dex?" Nira called, scanning the emergency frequencies. Silence stretched for long seconds before a familiar voice answered, weak but unmistakably real. "Still here, Princess. Still keeping promises." Relief flooded through her as she spotted his pod, battered but intact, drifting nearby. "The cores!" "Completely discharged," Thane's voice joined the conversation. "The cascade consumed them entirely. There's nothing left to rebuild with, Your Highness." Nira closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her people's extinction settle on her shoulders. Then Dex's voice came through the static again, gentle and sure. "We'll find another way," he said. "We always do." And floating there in the wreckage of two civilizations, one evil, one lost, Nira began to believe that maybe, just maybe, love really could conquer the darkness between the stars. The Lumanian race might be gone, but their legacy would live on in the choice she'd made, to save the galaxy rather than preserve the past. It was, she realized, exactly what her people would have wanted.